Imagine a typical classroom. I believe it would look a little bit like this one. And when you look at education as we have it today in many, many places, it's a lot about memorization, gaining knowledge, and your knowledge being assessed through standardized tests. And the ultimate success of your education is the degree that you're getting. Think about how the next 5 or 10 or 15 years are going to look like. A standardized world, you have a standardized education. We need people that navigate in uncharted waters. We need people that make decisions under uncertainty. And if you put this all together, that is entrepreneurship. We need more entrepreneurship. And thus, we need more entrepreneurship education. But how can education create such entrepreneurs? And let's relate a little bit to my personal story. I come from a working class family. Actually, I come from a one-company working class family. My grandma worked in the same company as my dad. My uncle worked there. My aunt worked there. We even lived in an apartment that was built by the company for those who worked at the company. Guess where I started my career? Same company, of course. So my path was actually pretty much laid out. I would start with a company. I would work there. In a couple of years, I would get some kind of leadership position. A little bit later, I would get a company car. Maybe they sent me abroad for some international experience. And by the age of 50, maybe I will be leading my own department. Linear, predictable, safe. And I was happy. Or at least I didn't know that I should not be happy, because I didn't know that there were alternatives out there. Sometimes ignorance is bliss. I never talked about entrepreneurship at home. I didn't know any entrepreneurs, not in the family, not in our circle of friends. And definitely did I not talk about entrepreneurship at school or during my bachelor studies. It was just not part of the conversation. But then I started grad school. And I was lucky enough to come to a grad school that was quite entrepreneurial. Suddenly, I was among people, both students and faculty, who were talking about business models, about growth opportunities, about business angels, about starting up companies. I was intrigued. I was fascinated. I also was a little bit amused, because, that was a totally strange world for me. And still, in the beginning, my career goal, my life goal, was going corporate. But maybe you know the old saying, constant dripping draws a hole in the stone. And over time, I started wondering, maybe this entrepreneurship thing is something for me. I started to explore. I started to engage a little bit more in those discussions about business models, about business ideas, started to form a team. And before I realized it, during my studies, some friends dragged me into my first startup. Same friends dragged me into my second startup later on. And as it happens, could happen that they are dragging me into another one as we speak. I was not groomed to become an entrepreneur. I was lucky enough to meet people that were taking me along, that were motivating me, and this was all about this grad school. This was all about the education that I got. Today I have many roles. Family father, investor, entrepreneur, but foremost, I'm an educator. And thus I'm thinking about it every day. What can we actually do in education institutions to help foster entrepreneurship? And when I'm talking entrepreneurship, it's not just about starting companies. It's cool if you have more startups. It's about this entrepreneurial mindset. It's about thinking in opportunities and not in challenges. It's about thinking in growth terms. It's about trying to make an impact. the entrepreneurial mindset, entrepreneurial thinking and acting. This is what entrepreneurship is about. So, over decades of thinking about what I could be doing, trying things out, experimenting at school, outside of school, I came up with what I call my 3.5 hypotheses how to foster entrepreneurship in education. The first hypothesis is we need to talk about entrepreneurship. Like in my example, entrepreneurship was not part of the conversation. I wasn't aware it is around just because we never talked about it. We never talked about it like we would be talking about politics or economy in general, if you're lucky. So creating spaces where you have the opportunity to talk about entrepreneurial behavior, where you have the opportunity to talk about business models, where you meet lecturers, where you meet students that engage you into a discussion. That is the very first step. Entrepreneurship has to be normalized. It shouldn't be seen as a magic, but it is something that is an alternative for many, many people, as something that helps us to prepare ourselves actually for the future. Talking is good, but you need also to be able to learn about the tools. I have a management professor, a colleague of mine, who is constantly telling me, you cannot teach entrepreneurship. You're born an entrepreneur or you're not. And I disagree completely. Because entrepreneurship is much about tools. We need to teach these tools. MVP, business model design, business plan making, lean startup. Those are tools that you can apply when you're thinking about really building a business. You wouldn't want a doctor to do a surgery with you if they're not trained. Why would we expect entrepreneurs to go out in the world and create something new with just a vague idea and no tool set and no methods? We need to teach those tools. And where else than in education? So, we create an environment where you talk about entrepreneurship. We create an environment where we help students learn the tools on entrepreneurship. But the ultimate competence development happens in application. So we need to create an environment where we make it happen, that students can try it out, that students build something. We have to give them the opportunities. We have to motivate them to try it out for themselves, to build something. And we have to give them the opportunity to fail. The best learning comes from failure. Create an environment where failure is seen as success because you have learned something. And give them the opportunity to get up again, try that again, fail again, hopefully a little bit less than, and continuously, iteratively improve. Through business plan seminars, through lectures, through incubators that universities could provide to their students. So we can talk about it, we learn about the tools, we actually can apply them and try them out, but that's not enough. The secret sauce actually comes from what I call my half hypothesis. 3.5 hypotheses. But this half hypothesis actually is the strongest one. You need to give them role models. You need to enable a conversation with other people who are thinking entrepreneurially, who maybe have started their own startups, who engage into the discussion. This can be mentors, which are older and more experienced than you, but it can also be fellow students. It could be faculty members. It could be seasoned entrepreneurs. Important is that students get an idea of, look at this person, and she made it. She can do it. Maybe, just maybe I can do it myself as well. And that creates the spark. Creating an environment where you have the possibility to relate to those people who have actually done it. We need to give them role models. So this comes together then as my 3.5 hypotheses for more entrepreneurship. We need to talk about it, we need to teach the tools, we need to let the students try, and we ultimately need to give them role models. What is all this about? It's about creating entrepreneurship, of course. It's hopefully about helping to create more startups. But more than that, it's about creating a mindset, creating the agility, creating the behavior that helps us not to be part of the future, but actually to create the future. Entrepreneurship education is about stopping to teach compliance with a system that does not work anymore because it has developed, and teach creation into a generation of builders. Thank you for the opportunity.